Great. Okay, got it. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for inviting me to come and show some of my work and then talk. So I'm going to show a little bit of my work just so you can see what I do. And then I'm going to share I have a presentation I show my students typically if they're so inclined of classical and contemporary figurative artists to study and to follow. So I'm going to show the contemporary ones today. That'll be very applicable. So real quick, let's turn it over to, I'm just gonna pull up my website just so you can have flavor of what I do here. And okay, so let me screen share. Share the screen. Share. Can you all see my website here?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, right. So this is my site. It needs some updating, but it begins and just kind of has a little bit of a slideshow of some of my pieces. My goal with my website is to for people to kind of just get in an instant the gist of what I bring to the table as an artist and what I do and kind of the overall impact as a figurative artist. So I teach life drawing at Paint Creek and other places, but life drawing is the foundation for figure sculpture, which is what I do professionally, which is what well, in addition to teaching. That's where I get commissions. I do life-size figure sculptures, mostly cast in bronze. And I mostly do sacred art, work for the Catholic Church, as it's what I know best, being a devout Catholic myself. And from here, let's go to work. Let's go to the portfolio page. I've got it divided between monuments, smaller works, works in clay, and works in metal. So monuments is where my heart is at. So I'll show you just a couple of these guys and some pieces that aren't on my website yet. This was a latest one. This is inspired by the Renaissance painting of the Madonna of the Streets. And this is kind of like an elaboration off of that at St. Benedict Catholic Church in Waterford Township.
Lovely.
Sorry, the sidebar is in my way, so I can't like X out. There it is. All right. Um, back to the monuments. St. Michael. And then he was a slightly less than life-size figure sculpture, cast in bronze for a family for their private area at Whitechapel Cemetery. And very, very fun to tell you all about the stories working with the clients and such and the adventures that those are. Um, this is my
You did that for a private for a family.
Yes, I did.
Wow.
So this crucifix is the life-size crucifix at St. John Vianney Catholic Church. I have three pieces there. I'll show you the next two in a moment here. And so my first commission, I was still in college when I got it and completed it 2 years after I graduated. And yeah, I was still probably, I would say people like that one the best of my pieces. Okay, I'm gonna show you some pieces that are move some of these things around. Bear with. Bear with. All right, so I have three pieces at St. John Vianney now. One, this is the there she is. Oh, why is it? I don't know why it's doing that weird pixely thing. But here we go. Blessed Mother statue, a life-size bronze Blessed Mother that belongs, it lives in the sanctuary now. She has a rose in her hand. And what? And a life-size St. John Vianney statue on the other side of the sanctuary. So these are in honor. So the pastor commissioned the crucifix, passed away from cancer some years later. So the Blessed Mother was commissioned to be in honor of him, and the St. John Vianney in honor of the founding pastor. So those three all belong, all live at St. John Vianney now, and they work together very nicely, I hope. My current piece that is at the Foundry, I'm gonna move my sidebar again, there it is a kneeling St. Francis statue of him This is going to go for the Capuchin Friars, have a retreat center in Washington Township. So this is a life size. This is the clay model that you can see. This is of St. Francis receiving the stigmata. Talking with the friars was so much fun because order priests are hardcore. Parish priests are different. But if they live in an order, they're very they really are on top of each other with the discipline. So friars their three vows are poverty, chastity, and obedience. So they're very hardcore. And they really wanted this depiction of St. Francis to be an authentic one. When you get really tired and sick of the bird bath St. Francis, you get this great scene is reduced to this cheesy image of, oh, he talked with the animals. And you're like, yeah, that's nice. And a lot of people like him for that. But the messages and the truths of that are behind the saint are so much deeper than that. The reason I work as a sacred artist is because, well, I'm very passionate about my faith, and I feel like the art is very banal compared to the realities that it's supposed to be depicting. So St. Francis was actually known as the second Christ. He was called that because of the reform that he brought to the Catholic Church, kind of reinvigorating so much of the faithful through with his order. And also near the end of his life, he received the stigmatas, which are the visible wounds of Christ on the body. Other saints have had these, like Padre Pio is a good example. So he had the side wound, he had the nails in his hands and his feet. So near the end of his life, this is other depictions. St. Francis saw this vision. I might have a picture. Aha, I do. I'll show you really quickly some of the things I saw leading up to. Before I got commissioned, tapped for this, I encountered this painting at St. Hyacinth National Basilica in Chicago. So this is kind of showing what happened historically with St. Francis. He was praying, and he receives this vision of this seraph, this six-winged seraph that's nailed to the cross. And it's both terrifying and beautiful for him. And he's overwhelmed by it. It's beautiful, but it's also terrifying, as it is an image of a man with the wings nailed to the cross. And that's after he receives this vision that the stigmatas appear on his flesh. They describe his flesh peeling up and folding over on itself as the nails visibly appeared in his hands and his feet. So that is what the friars wanted depicted. Oh yes. Real quick. So here's kind of an example of the flesh wrinkling up around. So I'm sorry if this is too visceral for some people, but so these are some of the images that inspired me going into this project. And it's been a privilege to work on it. So that's what I'm showing you here, is that I'm going tomorrow actually to finish this piece in wax to do the nails actually visibly there, but you can kind of see the flesh wrinkling up as his hands are in the action at the point in time of it being of the stigmata appearing. So that's what I'm working on right now. And so back real quick to that's my professional work as a sculptor, and I teach figure drawing all the rest of the time. I love portrait, I love figure, and so I pretty much any kind of medium, I'm all about it. So teaching realism in the figure is kind of one of the things that I live for. Figure drawing was one of my first loves. I took my first class before I went to college, and I can accurately say that it changed my life. And I love teaching figure drawing, and I think everybody in the world should do it. I think it would make it all a much better place. So here's some recent pieces. I've been having fun working with charcoal and pastel on paper, and just kind of trying to be a little bit more free and gestural with the figure. So looser figures are definitely where my heart lives. I love tight realism. But it's I like a drawing that gives your eye just a little bit more work to do, of lines coming
Mhm.
in and out, and of focus, and a little bit of extra line weight and looseness, and make it a little scratchy here and there. I've been changing the way that I've been drawing, kind of getting to this. My tomorrow actually will mark the 6 months since my father passed away, and I've discovered since that day, really, I just kind of haven't been able to draw the same way. I just don't want to draw the same way. I don't want to go back to it's like, I just kind of gotta race the tapes and do something different, to form some new neural pathways. And so I've been kind of gearing towards this pastel approach, and I've been loving it very much. And definitely wanting kind of just more soft poses. I haven't been attracted to things that are just very, very rigid necessarily. So a lot of reclining female figures have kind of been my where I've been finding my own enjoyment, as it were. So so that's where my figure drawings have been progressing. And teaching as a portrait I did for some people, for a guy. Yeah, so teaching figure drawing, I think there's endless depth, and I'm just so privileged to be able to teach figure. So figure drawing, one of the big things that I like to emphasize to my students is the fact that if you want to get better, you can't just stay in your box. If you want to become a good writer, you have to read good literature. If you want to become a good athlete, you have to study good athletes and study their technique. If you want to become a good singer, you have to listen to people with good vocal technique. And if you want to become a better artist, you have to look at people who are better than you. And it's very humbling, but it's so important. And I've seen myself and many others, I've seen myself improve and kind of come out of plateaus after I've spent some concentrated time looking at people who I want to emulate as an artist. And I'll tell people, it's like, you can't just, be looking at the people who are, at an art fair one year, or your neighbor down the street who likes to paint. I'm sure they're wonderful. You have to look at the masters. You have to look at people who are the kind of the movers and the shakers in the art scene, both in previous eras, like in the Renaissance, as well as today. So we're going to look at some of the contemporary figurative artists. So I like to show a series of contemporary figurative artists who are realistic technically, but I think you'll find that their work is very well, it has its own style, its own flavor, its own flair, necessary, definitely. And there's just endless wonderful technique to observe from these people, regardless of any kind of message coming from them. So these people you can also just follow on Instagram, or look at them on Google, or some of them even have like or Twitter accounts. So Shane Wolf is an extraordinary figurative artist. He's got a great story behind him. Went to University of Cincinnati, was working as an industrial designer. And then he changed his whole life and went towards classical art, studied at the Angel Academy in Rome, taught there, and is this incredible figurative artist. So with a lot of his studies that I'll just post on Instagram, you can see marvelous technique, not just in the studies themselves, but in what's in the background of these pictures. We can see in the background all these little blocked in gestures. You see how bold he is blocking in his shadows right on the figure. And you can see the geometric structure with which he's blocking in his forms. These are the hidden gems for any student of the human body to be inspired and want to emulate people like Shane Wolf. Something Shane Wolf does too is he has so much fun with his line. Those who have taken my class know that I really hate blind contour drawings, and I really try to get people to look at the mass and the volume of the body versus trying to get some sort of perfect little outline around it. But when you're at the upper levels like Shane Wolf here, He has so much fun with his line. He loses it in so many places and then brings it out. He makes it thick and heavy, and he shows the contour, the complexities of the contour of the human body with that very fun, active line. There's nothing stagnant about his work. And with so much fun and rich and texturals, how he layers up his colors to create this color and volume across the form of the human body. So I think everyone should think like a sculptor, no matter what they do, painting, drawing, industrial design, photography. You should always be looking at form, because that's what makes something feel real, because our whole world is composed of form and mass. So Shane Wolf is not a sculptor, but he may as well be, because he's giving us this wonderful sense of volume and form by rendering across the form with all these hatch marks as he builds up his colors and his shadows. So just if there's one artist you could follow who's a contemporary, just real rock star of the figurative art world right now, it's Shane Wolf. It's in Woo Howls at the Moon. And just a great foot study here, both in the gestural one and then the more complete one, to see the blocking in of the figure. More feet. Again, some more loose studies. It doesn't have to be perfectly realistic to have some juicy elements of realism just to make the viewer satisfied in looking at it. There's so many elements of design, of composition that can be found in a very loose sketch like this. Will Weston is another titan of the art world, artist and instructor. He can teach construction all day, every day. I like to use him as an example too, because as opposed to pursuing education at a university, you can take some classes with Will Weston and be able to be a professional animator. So he's one to study for anyone who really wants to up their game as far as anatomy and construction of the human body is concerned. He does these very active sketches of anatomy on the blackboard, and they take a while to kind of understand because it can be a little too complex at the onset. We spend some time with them and you can really appreciate what he's doing. Juliet Aristides or Aristides, I've never heard it pronounced, another wonderful figurative artist and instructor. And her finished works, as well as some of these looser, less defined pieces, are just feasts for the eyes with the elements. I like this study in particular because so oftentimes people come into class and they never want to study the back. They all just want to look at the front of the figure or the face. But the point is that you can turn every aspect, every angle, every view of the human body into a beautiful, masterful work of art, like she has shown us right here. And another point is we can get into, people can come into class, they can study the human body, and it feels like it isn't done if everything doesn't have a line around it. If every toenail isn't defined of the body, it's not a complete figure drawing. But that's not the case at all. You can choose and you can direct the viewer's eye towards just one beautiful little area of her scapula and the upper back, and then other parts can just disappear. And that's what's going to be so much more visually delicious for the viewer, because they're going to fill in the blanks themselves versus having everything spelled out for them. So it's how you let the viewer make the work with you. It's how you make it more interesting. It's how you get them invested in your work, is you don't spell everything out for them. Some more examples of her beautiful drawings. Rob Liberace, or Liberus, depending on who you're talking to. Rob and his wife and his children run a school, and they're all extraordinary figurative painters. All, focus on a narrative. He's very kind of like a modern day Norman Rockwell in many ways, with the activeness of his lines, the colors, and the stories that he puts into his work. Very classical, and I can't recommend looking at his pieces enough. And yeah, his narratives, I don't necessarily always know exactly what he's telling me, but I know that there is one, and it makes me think and be very curious. Some of his drawings. I'm going to go a little bit faster with some of these. Evan Kitson, another figurative artist and an instructor at the New York Academy of Art. He draws probably more skulls than I think I've ever seen in the entire human race. But as far as just elements of design that he puts in between figure and background and the structure, it's all structure. Again, not a sculptor, but he may as well be. He may as well be a sculptor with how he layers, how he adds, and how he subtracts from his drawings, almost like it's a piece of clay. Nora Venturelli is another figurative artist. She teaches at U of M in Eastern Michigan. Her watercolors and oil paints tell very different stories. Her watercolors get very loose and very design focused, but you can't, a figurative artist will always reveal their training that she has so much wonderful technique behind her that she can do something so loose like this and this. This is some more of her, this is the kind of stuff that you'll see in the galleries when it's the Nora Venturelli show. She has oil and acrylic of, very, very bold, kind of almost pop art in how some of these things are, but highly, highly realistic figures as well. Again, some of the more design elements that you see in her figures. Very structural, not a sculptor, but you got me fooled. Oh, sorry, this got out of order. This is Evan Kitson's work as well. Again, the building up a form, the color is just a very exciting piece. And how he creates mass and volume on a quote unquote flat surface. This is why I think everybody should think like a sculptor. Where my drawing took on a life of its own and where I started to find myself as an artist was when I studied abroad in Florence. And every night I would take my sketchbook and I would go out and I would draw the monuments. They're just there on display for the whole world to see. And so I would go and see and just look at them and draw them and try to figure out how to think like a sculptor. And in doing so, I kind of found a little bit of my voice and my passion and my understanding of the pieces and where I wanted to go next as an artist. Another example. A lot of in some circles, you'll see people get very persnickety about media, about what kind of materials you're using, how you're sharpening your pencil, what kind of paper, how far away from your paper you're standing, etc. And Evan Kitson teaches at one of the best universities in the country for the visual arts, and he's just layering pen. He's just using ballpoint pens to make his art, and it's a very effective study. That it doesn't take a lot to communicate an idea. It's not about having the right kind of material or the perfect paper or the right brush. It's about communicating. And if you communicate something to your viewer, then you have succeeded. Yay, and you can move on to communicating the next idea. If you're not telling them something or making them feel something, then the work is completely selfish. And what's the point? May as well toss it in the fire when you're done. And if you're doing that, fine, acceptable. But you're not exactly making something for the human race. So can you even call yourself an artist? Maybe not. Another example, this again, very sculptural across the form, creating volume on his figures. So bravo, Mr. Kitson. Look at his work, follow, just absorb how he does things. What's very nice to observe is the hand, how he uses the line weight to show a little bit of shadow. Again, not every finger has an outline around it. Not everything is perfectly defined. We just have a little, bit of a shadow here, no line there. That's the way to do it. Less can certainly be more in some of these cases. If you're not drawing bodies, you should be drawing apples if you're trying to understand form. Again, the ballpoint pen is perfectly acceptable. Okay, Nick Alm is a very prolific figurative painter today. And he creates these beautiful scenes, interiors, exteriors, people, and just a masterful painter and a thought-provoking one as well. So just beautiful study of light on this young woman here. And he creates some very interesting narratives. This kind of reminds me of Andres, with the jacket, how she kind of used the palette to create almost like this almost shimmery effect here. Again, he loves to play with forms coming in and out of space and just making bold, provocative, interesting, maybe even confusing statements, about this young woman surrounded by her bottles and glasses of alcohol. kind of goes in with this series of this piece here. We kind of have our modern day Bacchus, maybe at a wedding reception. But he references so many classical works of art with their composition, making modern paintings. So it's interesting and compositionally, just from the technical perspective, but it's also, you know, philosophically and all the ways he references well, any kind of classical art with his images. We've got, you know, our laurel wreath. We even have a goat. We got our grapes. We've got a scene of debauched humans. It's Bacchus is always a subject, and he's playing with that. So a kind of a fun converging of contemporary and classical worlds with his works. Some of his paintings, they have interesting narratives, and you can spend all day trying to figure out what he's saying, or you can just enjoy his use of space, of how he's you know, of how he's playing with the shadow and how he's dividing up his composition with the ceiling and the door and the wall and the shadow and this mysterious woman whose identity we don't know. It's all very yeah, I'm not sure the message that he's saying, but I can think of a couple, and it gets me filling in the blanks, kind of like whether it's that Juliet study that she did of the woman's back, like I can fill in the blanks myself with that. I can fill in the blanks here myself. It isn't totally spelled out for me. I could take a number of different interpretations.
What's this artist's name?
Nick Alm.
Okay.
Alm, like the kind you give to the poor. Some more provocative statements. And a study that people copy all the time just because it's a wonderful color study. Ramiro Sanchez, also another figurative artist and instructor at the Florence Academy of Art. I throw him in here in case this kind of resonates with anybody. Compositional. Jordan Sokol is another rock star. He's Mick Jagger of the figurative art scene right now. He gets a lot of really big deal commissions. I want to say he just did someone in the royal family, but he likes to do these figures that are with very, very, very black backgrounds, kind of very Caravaggio-esque, with the very intense chiaroscuro with bright highlights, dark shadows, and then referencing anything from the abstract expressionist art movement by showing the canvas and letting that come up to the realistic figure. A lot of different elements that play between design and realism, and then just pure emotion that he shows with his figures. And then just some nice technical studies to look at as well from Mr. Jordan Sokol. Self-portrait. Jacob Collins, for the uber realists out there, is the founder of the Grand Central Atelier in New York. And he's a interesting artist to look at because of basically what he created with the Grand Central Atelier and what that and the change that has made in artistic education across the globe, really, that you're seeing so much more emphasis on realism and figurative realism, landscape, still life, and kind of a large portion of the population kind of rejecting a lot of the contemporary universities' ideas about art. So his pictures are hard to find. They're all copyrighted. So look at his website to see a lot more and to see some of the work of the of his students. Aaron Westerberg is another figurative painter. And again, just the geometric, the composition, the color, the design, the quality of his work is very, very beautiful. He does these, it's almost becomes a game for your eye to look for the structure and amid these very kind of fluid compositions. We got between the woman's face and her hair and the fan and the fabric and the background, but then you zoom in just a little bit and you see that it's all rectangles. If you can draw a rectangle, if you can paint a rectangle, then you can go anywhere and do anything and draw all the fabric and complex backgrounds that you want, as long as you understand the geometric structure. Now, a couple of sculptors that I want to point your attention to look at, because again, I believe if you want to get better with drawing, you have to look at sculpture. You should arguably study sculpture and try it yourself. and then study the work of sculptures and draw sculptures. Go to the museum and draw the sculptures. You know, unlike your models, they're not gonna move. So they're great subjects. Adbal de Juana Goris is a figurative artist, and he really emphasizes kind of this deconstruction element to the figure. He can get very stylistic in his work, especially with pieces like this, as we have parts of the body almost like webbing and parts disappearing, but because he is such a strong figurative realist. So again, he makes a lot of thought-provoking pieces. As his work, the past couple years, he's getting more and more abstract with his art, which is very interesting to see. But I highly recommend following along with his process and his journey. A portrait of his. Erik Arnesen is a Norwegian sculptor, also trained at the Florence Academy of Art, just like Edvald de Juana Goris. And if heavy metal were represented in representational figure sculpture, I think it would be Erik Arnesen's work. He pushes it so far past the line, in my opinion, of showing every little tiny aspect of the anatomy of the human body. It's at a very, very intense level. This piece is called Empyrean, and he's casting smaller models for sale as well. And you can't be a sculptor without referencing Michelangelo, at least one. Looks like you got to do that to get into the club. So he's done some very interesting works since. Again, I highly recommend following along on Instagram, on Patreon. You can support him and see a little bit more of his process. It's very, very illuminating and thought-provoking. How he takes classical work and gives it this very, very, very sharp edge with the anatomy, as you can see. Emphasizing to the point of extremity. Another piece of his. I hope you get this. Mitch Shea is another instructor, the Florence Academy of Art. Again, pushing it beyond the boundaries. I like to tell my students that they're drawing, like, how far is too far with pushing the values, especially with beginners being very tentative, want to push them out of their comfort zone. And it's not going to be too much. When you're learning, when you're exploring, you should, voraciously explore the human body and try to see how far you can push your drawings. And these are sculptors who are trying very hard to push their sculptures to the edge. And I believe that they have succeeded. Peace. If you don't cringe a little bit looking at this hand pulling up his side, then yeah, I don't think you're a human. Brett Harvey is another figurative artist to study. Get through here. Alicia Ponzio, female figurative artist, Florence Academy of Art. These are all men, but her work, again, very, very high-end portraits that she gets commissioned to do. From the technical aspect of her work, I'd like to point out that the way she does hair, just treating it very loosely and blocky. She treats it like form. We're not trying to define hair follicles here. We are showing form. Hair is form, just like the rest of the body. But then also, if she's going to do a portrait, it's not going to be a person just sitting there looking straight ahead. She's going to add a little bit of expression, just subtle, you barely even notice it. Just our human looking off to the side, looking a little bit suspect towards something, just to give it that little bit of interest, that little bit of life, that little bit of sense of the spirit. Even though it's bronze, even though it's an inanimate object, you can still capture the essence of a human. So capturing the spirit, or the essence of a person in a portrait is not about getting every hair follicle right. It's not about the eyelashes. It's not about the freckles. It's about capturing a little bit of the sense of who they are. And you get that with a little tilt of the head. You get that with the eyes looking off to the side. You get that with a little bit of subtle parting of the lips. And that is going to communicate so much more and be so much stronger of a punch for the viewer and create some kind of a soul connection with them, so much more than just a very accurate, realistic rendering. some more of her work. Two pieces come together. I believe we have a dawn and dusk right now, two elements of her own personality, some self-portraits going on. Maudie Brady, another sculptor to focus on. All right, and then we're kind of take a different direction at this point. So I will stop it there as far as the figurative artists to observe. All right, so those are some of my top hitters as far as figurative artists to study. You can find them all on Instagram, on the interwebs, and just feast your eyes and hopefully grow as an artist, not just in technique, but also in personality as you look at some of these folks.
Good.